She was pulled over for speeding and the bodies of 2 children were found inside of her trunk.
You have to open that up all the way. What is that?
Huh?
What is that?
Dirty.
No. Pull it out. What the Get the in! Put your hands up!
33-year-old Nicole Johnson was asked by her sister to take care of her 2 children, 7-year-old Jocelyn and 5-year-old Larry. This wasn't supposed to be permanent, it was just going to be temporary, and her sister trusted her. Nicole took the kids to a hotel in Baltimore, and at one point she gets very angry with Jocelyn because she is accusing her of taking things that didn't belong to her. She gets so angry with Jocelyn that when she hits her, she falls to the ground and hits her head. Nicole panics and puts Jocelyn in a suitcase for over a year and doesn't tell anybody. It's now 1 year later, and 5-year-old Larry tells Nicole that he's very tired and wants to lay down in the back of the car. Nicole claims this is when all of a sudden Larry stopped breathing. So Nicole places his body inside of a storage bin right next to his sister in the trunk of her car. In July of 2021, Nicole gets pulled over for speeding. As police pull her over, they start to smell this horrid smell. The officer then asks her where this smell is coming from, and she says it's from these blankets that she has in the trunk. But he has a gut feeling that something isn't right. He opens the trunk and does see those blankets, but he also sees a suitcase with maggots coming out from it. Those officers obviously want to see what's inside that suitcase, and when she opens it, they see the body of a child. Upon further searching in that trunk, they find another body of a child. Nicole tries to explain to the officers what had happened to these children and that she didn't know what to do and thought that this was the best option. Nicole honestly believed that hiding these children and not saying anything would be the best option. Once the autopsy was done for both children, it was revealed that they were very malnourished. 7-year-old Jocelyn was only weighing 18 pounds and 5-year-old Larry was weighing 21 pounds. Throughout all of this, Nicole showed no remorse and was sentenced to 50 years in prison.
This woman fatally stabbed her boyfriend over 100 times during what her lawyer said was a cannabis-induced psychosis. Yet she walked free and only got community service. This is Bryn Spacher. She met 26-year-old Chad O'Melia at a dog park in California in early May of 2018, and the two began dating. But only a few weeks later, she would go on to brutally kill him. It was around midnight on May 27th when she went over to his apartment in Thousand Oaks, California, and the two began smoking weed out of a bong. According to Bryn, she didn't want to take the last hit, but she said that Chad pressured her into doing it. Sometime after, according to her, she had an adverse reaction to the weed and proceeded to stab him 108 times with multiple different knives. When authorities arrived, they found Chad lying in a pool of blood. Bryn was screaming hysterically and holding a long serrated bread knife, and before police could get to her, she plunged the knife into her own neck. Authorities had to tase her and hit her multiple times with their batons to subdue her. Chad was pronounced dead at the scene, but paramedics were able to save Bryn's life. She was initially arrested after the incident, but was released on bail, where she would go on to live her life free in the public until the trial began in December of last year. Bryn was facing only 4 years in prison, but during the trial, her attorney claimed that the murder was a direct result of a cannabis-induced psychotic disorder. They also said that she was involuntarily intoxicated because Bryn claimed that Chad intimidated her into taking the last bong hit. And under California criminal law, people are responsible for their actions when impaired by alcohol or drugs, unless their intoxication was involuntary. Because of this, the jury took less than 4 hours to convict her of involuntary manslaughter. Judge David Worley of the Ventura County Superior Court sentenced her to 2 years probation with no prison time at all for the murder. Bryn also has to complete 100 hours of community service focused on raising awareness about the effects of marijuana-induced psychosis. Judge Worley said that his decision was based on the lack of culpability. He said that from that point forward, after smoking marijuana, Bryn had no control over her own actions. Bryn's lawyer was obviously very happy with this ruling, as he said, quote, "Judge Worley did the right and courageous thing," end quote. On the other hand, Chad's family is completely heartbroken over this decision. He was only 26. He was a hardworking accountant. He was kind, motivated, and everyone's friend, and he had his whole life ahead of him. His family says that this ruling sets a dangerous precedent, and that Judge Worley basically just gave everyone in the state of California who smokes weed a license to kill. This case is honestly insane, but I'm curious to know what you guys think about it.
The infamous girl in the box case has a scary new update. She was kidnapped and left in a box for 7 years, and the man responsible could be getting out of prison very shortly. It was the 1970s. 20-year-old Colleen Stan was planning on going from Oregon to California to attend a friend's birthday party, but that day her car didn't start. So she decided to hitchhike, which was a lot more common then than it is today in 2024. It was a long trip, but she hitched a ride from multiple cars and everything went smoothly and it took her as far as they were going. Then a car full of rowdy young men pulled up next to Colleen and offered her a ride, and she just kind of got bad vibes and declined the ride. In the next car to pull up and offer Colleen a ride was a family, a young married couple and their little baby. What could be safer than that? So Colleen accepted and got in their car. And it would be a terrible mistake, because that married couple was Cameron and Janice, and they had an agreement that Cameron could abduct and keep a young girl. Cameron kept Colleen in a box for years, only letting her out to cook or clean or be SA'd by him or be hurt. Pretty much just to fulfill all of Cameron's sick desires. Cameron was actually able to convince Colleen that a huge underground organization called The Company was behind all of this, and if she ever tried to leave, her and her family would get hurt, and that Colleen was essentially his property now. He had her completely brainwashed. Eventually, he even let Colleen call her family and took her to visit them, pretending to be her fiance. He would let her go jogging, work at a hotel, because he knew that he had complete control over her. And the wife, Janice, was already pretty jealous about how much time her husband was spending with Colleen. So when Cameron came to her and said, "Hey, I want to abduct more girls and keep more girls," Janice had enough. Janice went to Colleen and told her that the stuff about the company was a total lie and actually let her escape after 7 years in captivity. And then she turned her husband in. This really pisses me off, but let me know your opinion. Investigators never charged Janice with anything because they saw her as a victim of Cameron's as well. But Cameron was found guilty and sentenced to 104 years in prison. But he's recently been fighting for his release. And in August this year, so in just a few months, he has a hearing. He's going to sit in front of a jury and try to show them that he's not a threat to society anymore. And if he does it successfully, he will be getting out of prison very, very shortly.
Imagine your child being killed at the Cinderella Castle in Disney World. This is absolutely horrifying. It was the 11th of August 1977 in Disney World in Florida. Now, the Cinderella Castle is probably one of the most iconic images when you think about Disney World or Disneyland. So many people line up to have their selfies taken there, not knowing that a child literally died there. Joel Good was visiting the park with his mum Marietta and dad Harry and his siblings. Joel was just 4 years old and he was one of 4 boys, Harry, Michael and Jeffrey. They were from Chicago and they were a lovely family, but obviously the parents had their hands full. And the family were really enjoying their trip to the park, and like most families, they were gathered round the Cinderella Castle for the electric light parade at the end of the night. But at roughly 11 p.m, Marietta looked down and noticed that her son Joel was missing. She obviously went into complete panic mode, because what the hell do you do if your child's missing at Disney? Like, it's literally like looking for a needle in a haystack, especially at that time of night. They were hunting absolutely everywhere, but there was just no sign of him, and like I said, it was pitch black at this point, so it was incredibly difficult. But tragically, just 3 hours later, they did make a discovery. Joel was found dead in the moat of the Cinderella Castle. This was obviously absolutely devastating for the family. They had no idea what the hell had happened, so the child was taken off for an autopsy. No evidence of foul play was found, so they had to determine that this had been a simple case of him drowning in the moat. But the family were obviously raging, and they decided to sue Disney World for wrongful death. Disney argued that the moat was decorative and wasn't unreasonably dangerous, but a jury did award each parent $1 million and also found that the parents were negligent. Did you guys know about this? Because I feel like nobody talks about it.
This teenage boy was found dead under really mysterious circumstances after a 4-day party. This case is currently unsolved and ongoing, and we haven't covered an unsolved case together in a really long time, so I'm really interested to get your guys' take on this. Back in September 2023, shortly before 6 a.m., the body of 19-year-old Noah Pressgrove was found alongside a highway in Oklahoma with a list of injuries and mysterious details about this long. Noah's body was clothesless other than a pair of shoes he was wearing that did not match. He had multiple blunt force injuries, severe skull fractures, broken ribs, his fingers were torn up, and teeth on the top and bottom row were either shattered or just completely knocked out. His body was found by a truck driver. He was in a fetal position. Around his body were pieces of metal chain, clumps of hair, a piece of one of his teeth, and also a pair of his shorts. So this happened back in September of 2023, but just this past Monday, so like a couple days ago, all of these details were finally released with his autopsy. Investigators do not believe that this was a hit and run situation, but as far as we know, they aren't considering it foul play either. So what other explanations are there? The night that Noah passed away, he was actually at a party about a mile away from where his body was found. A lot of sources actually say that this was a 4-day-long party just full of ratty teenagers and early 20-somethings, and that earlier that night, Noah and a group of other guys at the party were messing around with some ATVs, and there was some kind of incident where Noah was injured. It's possible that some of the injuries that Noah had on his body when he was found dead were from this ATV incident, but we just don't know. Shortly after this ATV incident, Noah got in a fight with his girlfriend. I don't know what the fight was about, but it made Noah so upset that he decided to leave the party. And then a few hours later, shortly before 6 a.m., his body was found on the side of that highway. Something I find interesting about the girlfriend is Noah's family, or at least his sister, has gone on the record saying that she had no idea about this girlfriend's existence at all. Honestly, Noah's family is just really suspicious of everything in this case. They say they're not getting any answers from the police, and it is a small Oklahoma town, so maybe there's a cover-up involved. There's a lot of discussion about this ATV accident that Noah was in a few hours before he passed away. Some people think that maybe he was more injured than he thought he was, and because of the adrenaline and alcohol, maybe he didn't realize and had some kind of internal bleeding, which led to him passing away. And I would be more willing to believe this theory, except for the fact that Noah was found not wearing clothes. This is the one detail that stops me from believing that this was anything other than foul play. Personally, and this is just my theory, I think it makes the most sense that Noah was jumped by a group of guys that were at that party. Maybe it had something to do with the fight that he had got in with his girlfriend. Maybe it didn't, but that group of people that jumped him then removed his clothes to kind of further humiliate Noah, and he tragically succumbed to his injuries. I really just hope, with the amount of attention that Noah's case is getting on social media since his autopsy was released on Monday, that it'll put some more pressure on the police that are on this case to really just get his family answers. So I really do urge you guys, if you can, to share this video or Noah's case in any way you can, and please leave all your thoughts, theories, questions, and case suggestions in the comments for me.
They had no idea their colleague was bringing in his dead daughter to work every day. Just a warning, this is obviously a very shocking and disturbing case involving a child. It was September 2019 in New Hampshire in the US. Little Harmony Montgomery was born when her dad was still in prison. Little Harmony had such a chaotic start to her life. Her mum struggled really badly with substance addiction and had Harmony taken off her at least 3 times before she was even 4 years old. So finally in 2018, she was taken off the mum for good and placed into foster care. And it felt like everything was kind of going to be okay for Harmony. She was going to have a fairly normal upbringing. However, infuriatingly, she was then given back to her dad as soon as he was released from prison. Bear in mind the reasons he was behind bars in the first place were pretty shocking. These were like violent crimes. He had convictions of theft, burglary, substance possession, and even shooting a guy during a substance deal. Not somebody you'd leave in charge of a very small child, right? And it gives me actual chills hearing about some of the things that the neighbours heard that he was doing to that child. It's absolutely heartbreaking but infuriating in equal measure. Her dad by this point had remarried and had other kids, and Harmony was living with that family. But he was 100% being abusive to this little girl. People noticed she'd appear with like full-on black eyes. Word started spreading as well that he would do sick punishments, including making her clean the toilet with her own toothbrush. She was last spotted alive on the 11th of September 2019. Now, people had actually called social services about the rumours that were going around. They were like, look, this guy clearly isn't treating his daughter well. She's covered in bruises constantly. They were like, we're hearing all this crazy stuff about the family. Can you please go and check it out? But when social services showed up to the house, Adam shoved little Montgomery in his car and just took off. I don't know how he got away with everything that he did for so long. It's actually sickening to me. It wasn't until November 2021 that Harmony's biological mother actually rang police. She had reason to believe she was a missing person. Now, previously, she didn't see Harmony a whole lot, but she did FaceTime her regularly, and Adam had stopped all that. He wouldn't even let her speak, like, on the phone, which was extremely sus. But frustratingly, an official search wasn't even started until the end of December that year. So police tried and failed to search for this little girl absolutely everywhere. By this point, Adam was raising huge flags. Now, he was the legal guardian of this child, and he couldn't tell police where she was. He kept chopping and changing his story. He was super on edge. He seemed nervous. So officers were like, right, okay, we've got reason to believe you're involved here. And Kayla, his wife, was arrested too, because bear in mind, she's supposed to be looking after this little girl as well. Why not give a straight answer to where she is? Kayla ended up telling police just an absolutely disgusting story. This makes me physically sick. She admitted to police that while they were all in the car together, Adam decided to full-on punch Harmony in the face. Maybe even more shocking to me is the fact that nobody did anything. Adam and Kayla just decided, with a dead child strapped into a car seat, they would just carry on driving to Burger King and get some food. She said they both then drove to do substances H and F and decided to hide the little girl's body. They stuffed her in a duffel bag, and they'd been keeping her for years. Bear in mind, this was 2 years prior to the search. They'd stored her body in a cooler in the apartment, and by the time the officers actually searched that apartment, they found the bag in a ceiling vent. Chillingly, there were deep red bloodstains where it had been stored. And one of the most horrifying parts of this story to me is that apparently neighbors started asking questions about a smell coming from that apartment. So Adam decided that he needed to start removing the duffel bag from the apartment and started taking it to work with him. Now, he worked at a local pie factory. None of his colleagues had any idea that what was in his duffel bag that he was bringing there every day was a deceased little girl. There's actually no other words for the next bit. Adam is believed to have bought a circular saw and a power grinder and disposed of his daughter's body. Kayla literally reported seeing him trying to flush some of his daughter's remains down the toilet. How do you stay with a person who is capable of doing that? There were rumors that he was of the opinion that, like, if there's no body, there's no crime. I'm not going to be charged for anything if they can't ever find the little girl, but he was wrong. Thankfully, Kayla was actually arrested for this. She did get 18 months for lying to police, but in my opinion, that is nowhere near enough. Adam was given a total of 56 years to life in prison.
Today's case is about a girl whose dream was to kill 250 men. You may know her, you may not, but she goes by the name of Cherry Domina, but her real name is Sarah. The girl was literally my age. She was born in 2002 in Switzerland, but then she later moved to Bavaria, Germany with her parents as a kid. Everything was normal. I mean, she had a lot of friends. She was doing really good in school. She even had a pet bunny that she loved and she treated like a best friend. She also had a very close relationship with her parents, but when Sarah became a teenager, all of that changed. She became rebellious. She started doing the green, if you know, you know. She started breaking rules, missing curfew, throwing parties, and just ignoring her parents completely. She'd skip school and have horrible grades, but whenever she did attend, Sarah would just be so mean, and she would just start fights with anyone over the littlest things, to the point where her own friends started to avoid her. Her physical appearance also changed a lot. She started wearing heavy makeup and dyed her hair, which is completely normal for a teenager, don't get me wrong. But at around 16, it just starts getting weirder. She starts these rumors herself at school that she was a prostitute. She would brag about making a lot of money just from selling herself to men for cash. Also around this time, she gets into stronger hardcore substances and actually gets arrested for possession. After being arrested though, Sarah didn't have some like inner awakening and change. Things only got worse, but I do need a snack to this, so bear with me. One day, Sarah's mom walked into her room and found a tied rope hanging in the closet. This was too much for her parents to handle, and they actually took her to a psychiatric facility for her well-being. But there, Sarah continued her mischief ways by trying to convince another patient to unalive themselves, but thank God it didn't work. She would remain there for an extended stay, but then she was released at around age 17. But by now, she is even worse than before because now she's obsessed with serial killers like Ted Bundy, Jack the Ripper, and Richard Ramirez. She read all about their gruesome crimes in full detail and fantasized about doing them herself. Around this time, Sarah also got her very first boyfriend, a guy named Leon, but he was also a train wreck, but they were madly in love. As a couple, they would do like bedroom stuff and it would get really violent. Sarah would literally beg him to hurt her, basically torture her, like bruises, cuts. She wanted it all. And for the first 2 years, Leon was into it, but Sarah always wanted the violence to be more intense. And when Leon saw all those wounds, scratches, and marks all over her, it honestly started making him really uncomfortable. But this pushed Sarah to the literal edge. She was heartbroken, and even more, she felt betrayed. In a blind rage, Sarah wanted revenge on not just Leon, but on all men. Talk about trust issues. She started spreading the nastiest rumors about Leon, saying that he had choked her, he abused her, SA'd her, and even took nude photos of her and posted it online after the fact. And then she texts her friend and says, the biggest serial killer has committed around 250 murders. I'm going to do more than that. And this is when Sarah starts putting her murderous plans into action. With the help of a friend, she buys a 12-inch camping knife. Sarah even started Googling things like, quote, how long does it take someone to die if you stab them in the neck? She decided that since she is easily able to get men to do whatever she wanted, she's going to start luring them through a dating app. She signs up on multiple dating apps like Tinder under the name Domina Cherry, and she wrote in her bio that she was 19 years old and a virgin and was into BDSM. In only 3 days, 224 dudes were messaging her. She would tease these guys, telling them that she is down to do anything and everything in the bedroom, that she likes to be controlled, tied up, handcuffs, all of it. And all these disgusting, creepy old men, all they heard was that she was 19 and a submissive virgin. One guy even asked Sarah if he could be her slave, so you can see how on May 1st, she easily lured her first victim. 39-year-old Zay, who was actually not looking for a hookup, but a long-term girlfriend, picked her up on the first date. But on the way to the date, she made him pull over to the side of the road. And using the knife that she had been hiding, she stabs him in the neck. Blood just starts gushing out of his neck. Zayd immediately fought back, and I guess Sarah didn't really expect it. I think she thought, stab, drops dead. Because she completely panics, bolts out of the car, and takes off running, covered in blood and mud. While running on the road, she is screaming, I'm a murderer, so excitedly. And then someone spots her and they call 911. Talk about being discreet. And in just 37 minutes of her attempted murder, Sarah is in handcuffs. The officer literally asked her, why do you look like you're a walking crime scene? She told them she just wanted to slice someone's neck and watch them bleed to death. They obviously arrested her right away and they took her in for questioning. After the attack, Zayd unfortunately did die in a coma, so Sarah's charges upped from attempted murder to murder. But Sarah showed absolutely zero remorse for what she just did and the life she just took. While in prison, Sarah asked her mom, hey, can you kill Leon for me? I mean, she obviously said no, but that's crazy. She actually stated that she was so upset that she was caught too early, not the fact that she just killed someone. Sarah was later found to be mentally ill and she was sentenced to only 12 years in the psychiatric facility. That means that she could potentially be released by the time that she is 31. I don't know, y'all. I think people like that can't be changed, but who knows? Maybe people change. Anyways, as always, take care and be careful who you date because they could literally be a murderer. I have heard too many stories.
She was kidnapped and then tortured for 48 hours before being barbarically murdered by people she thought were her friends. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the torture and murder of Jennifer Doherty, the case of the Greenberg Six. Jennifer Doherty was one of 3 daughters from her loving parents. The family lived in Pennsylvania, and from a very young age, they started to notice that Jennifer was a little bit different. She would eventually be diagnosed with a mental disability. Part of that for Jennifer meant that she had a lower mental age to what her physical age was. At the age of 30, she had a mental age of a 12 to 14-year-old, meaning that she could be too trusting and she could easily be manipulated. Jennifer Jennifer was described as an easygoing, lovely-natured girl who saw the best in everyone. She was well liked by all of the people around her, and she absolutely loved to make people happy and smile. Her hobbies included singing, dancing. She absolutely loved to get herself out on a walk. She watched college football, wrestling, and also the odd horror movie. Despite her intellectual disability, Jennifer was not going to let anything hold her back. She was very determined. In fact, at the time of this case, when she was 30 years old, she was actually looking to move out of her parents' home and into her own apartment. She was independent. She could get on the bus into town and take herself from A to B wherever she needed to go, including taking herself to doctor's appointments. Jennifer often visited a community centre in Greensburg, Pennsylvania, which was called West Place. This was like a community hub for other people with disabilities. They would be surrounded by their peers, and this gave them the opportunity to socialise, make friends, build connections. And they also offered therapy sessions there as well. It was here that Jennifer befriended two girls named Peggy and Angela. Through them, she became introduced to a wider circle of friends, which included a man named Ricky, who Jennifer took a liking to. Ricky, however, was in some sort of relationship with Angela, who was a minor. She was 17, and I believe he was 21 years old, and Angela was also pregnant with his baby. Angela caught on about Jennifer's liking of Ricky, and immediately she began to burn with jealousy and took a very aggressive disliking towards Jennifer. In February 2010, Greensburg was experiencing heavy snowfall. Jennifer was set to go into town to go to a doctor's appointment, and so before she left, she scribbled down a note on an envelope for her mum. This read, quote, "Mom, I hope you have a good day at work, and I also love you very much. I will talk with you sometime later." Jennifer's stepdad would drop her off at the bus stop so that she could get the bus into town. He gave her a hug and a kiss and waved her off, having no idea that that would be the last time he saw his daughter alive. Jennifer was also set to have a sleepover at Angela's apartment. However, when she arrived, she had no idea that 6 people would be there awaiting her, and they had horrific intentions. Upon her arrival, her handbag was ripped away from her and her phone and her money was stolen. Over the next 2 days, 48 hours, she would be the victim of cruel, inhumane, barbaric torture. She would be bound with Christmas lights and tinsel and then beaten with an array of different objects. This included a towel rack, a hoover, and a crutch, the beating being so bad that it resulted in blood splattering on the roof and on the walls. She was forced to drink bleach, vegetable oil with spices mixed into it, urine, feces, and medication. Jennifer's plea for mercy, for help, her begging them to stop what they were doing and just let her go, only made them escalate what they were doing. Angela, who again is only 17 years old and is pregnant, would climb on top of Jennifer and repeatedly punch her in the face while verbally abusing her. Her hair would be cut down to the scalp, almost shaved, and a sock would be stuffed into her mouth, gagging her. The group deprived her of food and water, and whenever she asked for a drink, that is when they would force her to drink the awful concoctions that they were coming up with. They would force her to drink it even after she was vomiting. Horrifically, Jennifer was also R-worded. Partway through this torture, there was an opportunity to save Jennifer, and that is when the police arrived at the apartment. A tenant who used to live there, who was moving out, had returned back to the apartment to pick up some of their belongings. This person and one of the perpetrators got into a fight, which resulted in the police getting called. When the police arrived, they walked around with the old tenant, searching the apartment for some of their belongings, apparently missing some of the bloody instruments that were lay about and the blood on the walls and on the ceilings. They also missed Jennifer, who by now had been stripped naked and forced into the attic, terrified into silence. She had been warned that if she made any noise while the police were inside, that they would kill her, but promised that if she stayed silent, they would let her go. Again, remember, this is a 30-year-old woman with the mind of a preteen. All 6 of the perpetrators would often get together to have what they called family meetings. During these family meetings, they were discussing what they were going to do to Jennifer until finally they all agreed that they had to kill her. She would be forced to write a self-unaliving note before being dragged into the bathroom. Using a knife, Melvin would slit her throat, and when she didn't die, he turned around and shouted, quote, "This bitch still ain't dead." He tried cutting her wrists before eventually wrapping the Christmas lights around her neck, likely digging into her gaping wound, and strangled her until she died. Angela suggested burning Jennifer's body, however the group eventually decided that they were going to wrap her up, stuff her into a bin, and hide her under a van/truck which was parked in a nearby school. Her body would be discovered on the 11th of February, and due to the extent of her injuries, she was black and blue in bruises, she was bloody, she was swelled, her head being cut, she was very small in stature. The authorities didn't know if they had a child or an adult here, if they had a boy, man, woman or girl. Eventually, however, she would be identified by one of her family members. Her family had been worried sick in the days during her captivity. Police were able to track down which house/apartment this bin belonged to, which eventually led them to all 6 of the perpetrators. A search of the apartment would uncover sharp, bloodied instrument, the crutch, Jennifer's belongings being hid in a box in the attic, and so much more. All of the evil 6 would be arrested and convicted of the murder of 30-year-old Jennifer Doherty. They were sentenced to between 30 years to serve and death.
This is the story of Donovan Holt. On the morning of July 31st, 2023, 29-year-old April Holt and her 33-year-old husband, Donovan Holt, got into a heated argument. As the argument got louder, they took it to the bathroom so their 7-year-old son wouldn't hear. But it was too late. 7-year-old Denzel had already had his ear to the door. He was trying to make out what his parents were arguing about, and when he noticed that they went to the bathroom, he came out of his room to peek under the bathroom door. He seen both of his parents' feet, but he couldn't quite make out what they were saying, so he just went back to his room. Moments later, Donovan started getting their son ready for the day, picking out his clothes, cooking him something to eat, and as he was cooking, he told Denzel to go check on his mother because she still hasn't come out the bathroom. When their son opened up the door, he not only seen his mother laying there with a plastic bag wrapped around her head, she was laying there with a plastic bag wrapped tightly around her head with duct tape. Donovan immediately called 911 and he told the authorities that it looked like his wife had committed suicide. He then called April's mother, Jamie Dickerson. She met them at the hospital. Now, even though April was still alive, she was brain dead due to the lack of oxygen to the brain. But Jamie noticed the marks on her daughter's wrist, her neck, her ankles. She did not believe that she committed suicide. And Donovan was acting strange at the hospital. He even left and went back to their apartment twice. The same day, April was rushed to the hospital. April died less than 24 hours after being rushed to the hospital. Her death was labeled a suicide due to complications of suffocation. They tried to convince us that this was an open shut case, but Jamie, April's mother, was not having it. She told investigators about the marks she seen on her daughter's body. She told them that she was not suicidal, but they didn't listen. She even told them that April asked for a divorce just 2 weeks prior to her death. It was just not enough evidence, they said. But April's 7-year-old son told his grandmother about the argument his parents had that morning. And Jamie found out that it was no mention of the argument during Donovan's interrogation. Jamie then requested a full case file from the original investigation. And she filed a complaint against the Community Review Board in Nashville, which prompted a full review on how this case was handled. The pressure from the complaint prompted the Nashville Police Department to finally conduct a second investigation. After looking over her daughter's case file, the autopsy report definitely shows the marks Jamie seen on her daughter that day in the hospital. Why was nothing ever done? There were only 2 prints on the bag and the duct tape, and both prints belonged to Donovan. April's prints was not on neither. That really blows my mind how they let that slide. But Jamie took matters into her own hand. She FaceTimed Donovan. She threatened to take the new evidence to the cold case investigators if he did not confess. And he did. He had told Jamie that him and April were having rough intercourse and it got out of hand. Now, Jamie knew this was a lie, but it was still indicating that he had done something to April. So she took the recorded tape to investigators anyway. This was enough evidence to make an arrest. September 2024, they arrested Donovan, but his story changed again. Now, I've read that his story changed because of the plea deal, and I also read that his story changed because he found out that his son heard the argument the morning of the murder. But he made a full confession to killing April. He took a plea deal and he was only sentenced to 2 years in prison. 2 years. I am mind blown by that. If it wasn't for April's mother, Donovan would have gotten away with this. She fought tooth and nail for her daughter. And I know this is not the outcome that she wanted, but we all know who he is and what he's done. I literally just discovered this case today, just scrolling TikTok, and April's mother came across my timeline. Show her some love. Jamie Dickerson, 22. She is still talking about her daughter. Go to her page, show love, support. Remember this face, remember this name, Donovan Holt. 2 years is crazy. I wish nothing but the worst for you.
Shortly after this photo was taken, the beautiful bride would be killed. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the death of Samantha Miller. On the 28th of April 2023, 37-year-old Eric Hutchinson and 34-year-old Samantha Miller finally tied the knot in front of 120 guests on Folly Beach in North Carolina. They had a beautiful ceremony and spent the rest of the evening celebrating. At around 10 p.m, Eric and Samantha, along with 2 other people, climbed into a golf cart and began to make their way back to their accommodation nearby, when they would be ploughed into by a car going 65 miles an hour, 40 miles over the speed limit. Driving that car was 26-year-old Jamie Lee Komorowski, who was drunk out of her mind over 3 times the legal limit. Eric and the 2 other passengers were severely injured, whereas Samantha, who was still wearing her wedding dress, would die at the scene. Upon the policeman's arrival, Jamie Lee, who was drunk and slurring her words, told the police that something had crashed into her. She would be arrested on several charges, including 3 DUIs and reckless homicide. Jamie would spend the next 10 months in jail. However, in March of this year, she was released on a $150,000 bond and was placed under house arrest. She must abide to strict conditions, including not leaving the house unless it is for medical attention or a court date. She must wear a tracker around her ankle, all while she awaits trial. She has expressed no remorse for what she did to Samantha, and allegedly in a jail call between her and her dad, she was complaining that this was going to ruin her life. In another call, her and her sister are chatting, where Jamie says that within the next 2 years, she should be living her best life. When her trial finally comes, if she is convicted of all of her charges, she could face up to 25 years in prison. Sadly, Eric and Samantha's mum Lisa are in a messy court dispute over Samantha's inheritance. Eric has filed a wrongful death lawsuit, which could see him receiving upwards of millions of dollars for Samantha's death. And Lisa, who has challenged the validity of her daughter and son-in-law's marriage, has said that she believes she should be the sole beneficiary. Allegedly, Eric has offered to give Lisa half of any money that he receives. However, he and Lisa are sadly going through a very messy legal battle.
This is the story of Jonathan Green. On the evening of June 21st, 2000, 12-year-old Christina, who's pictured right here, and her sister, 16-year-old Victoria, decided to go over their friend Marie's house while their father and their other sister, whose name is Jennifer, was out getting dinner for the house. Now, the girls would usually walk to Marie's house because she lives right down the road, but Victoria's boyfriend decided to pick them up this day. Once they got to Marie's house, they stood outside and talked to some other teenagers they knew from the neighborhood. And all of a sudden, Christina and her sister Victoria started to argue. Victoria walked away from the argument and went inside of Marie's house. Shortly after, one of the teenagers came and told Victoria that Christina was angry and she left. When Victoria returned home, she seen Christina was still not there. The next morning, the girl's father seen Jennifer and Victoria on the couch sleep. He noticed that the girl's bedroom door was closed, and he automatically thought Christina was in there sleeping. He left out for work, but when he returned around 3 or 4 p.m., Jennifer and Victoria told him that Christina still has not been home from last night. Their father, whose name is Victor Neal, told the girls to go to Marie's house and tell Christina to come home. But when they got there, Marie told the girls that she has not seen Christina since yesterday. It was then that Victoria decided to tell her father about the argument her and Christina had had. After learning about the argument, the father told the girls to check at another friend's house, which Christina was not there either. It was then that the family decided to search the neighborhood. Along a road near the girls' home, Victoria and Marie finds Christina's glasses. They were smashed and broken. But Victoria testified that Christina had a habit with breaking her glasses when she was mad. They stopped looking for Christina at around 11 p.m. The next morning, the girl's father asked his sister if she could look for Christina while he was at work. Christina had run away before. That's why they weren't so quick to call the police. But he told his sister if she cannot find Christina, please report her missing. Later that day, after another failed attempt, the girl's aunt reported Christina missing to Montgomery County Sheriff's deputy. Local law enforcement then joined the family on the search for Christina, and on June 26, FBI joined the search. On that same day, Jennifer and her mother found Christina's underwear at the edge of the woods across from the girl's home. Around that same time, Victoria found Christina's bracelet and necklace along a pathway in the woods. On June 28th, investigators questioned the girl's neighbor, Jonathan Green. He said he had no information concerning Christina's disappearance and that he was either at home or at his neighbor's house the night she disappeared. He gave investigators permission to search his property, but only under one condition: he must be present. They did a courtesy search and didn't find anything of significance. But a few days later, they questioned Green again, and he gave them the same story: I was at home or I was at my neighbor's house. On July 19th, almost a month after Christina disappeared, Emmanuel Jim, who's also Victoria's boyfriend, he lives behind Jonathan. He told investigators that Jonathan had an unusually large fire pile the day after Christina disappeared. A few days later, investigators went to question Jonathan for a third time and search his property again. He agreed again, but just like last time, he said he has to be present. FBI agents was walking around the burn pile and Jonathan was walking right with him. One agent stuck a metal probe in the soil to see if it's been disturbed. The probe sunk down 3 feet. It was then that they knew that this area had been dug up recently. Without letting it be known to Jonathan, another FBI agent can smell a distinct odor. He said it smelled like a decaying body. So the investigation team started digging up the burn pile themselves. This made Jonathan extremely angry, so angry that he told them to get off his property. But the investigators wasn't waiting another day. They came back with a search warrant that night. But when they got there, the burn pile was dug up, looking like a shallow grave with an extremely bad odor coming from it. The investigators asked Jonathan what happened to the pile. He said, I dug it up to show you guys that there's no dead body here. But the police had a trick up their sleeve for him. They bought that good old cadaver dog up out the car. The police thought the cadaver dog was going to go towards the shallow grave. As he was walking to it, he turned to the house. Once in the house, the dog was trying to get behind a reclining chair that was in the corner of a room. Investigators peeked behind the chair and was shocked to see what seemed to be a foot sticking out of a blue bag. It was then Jonathan said, those Mexicans are setting me up, putting a body inside of my house. Boy, the remains were 12-year-old Christina Neal. She had literature marks on her neck, indicating that she was strangled. Her hands were tied behind her back, and she was essayed before she died. She was wrapped in a blanket and stuffed in a blue bag. They found 2 black hairs on her private area during her autopsy, which linked back to Jonathan Green. Christina's underwear that was found 5 days after she disappeared has the same fibers on them as Jonathan's carpet. It was overwhelming evidence, but Jonathan still said he was innocent. He never confessed to this crime. He was sentenced to death on July 17th, 2002. He was executed by lethal injection on October 10th, 2012. Even right after they put the needle in him, he screamed, "You're killing an innocent man." What y'all think?
A despicable man to his core. Like, how do I explain this to you? His nickname was the Morgue Monster. He really began committing crimes in the 80s, but this whole case was not solved until 2020. He was being investigated in relation to 2 deaths. But what authorities found during their investigation, I can't even. They found over 4 million images and hidden devices that he had been keeping of himself doing the most unspeakable things. For over 30 years, 3 decades, he went undetected. Which is sickening, but when he was confessing, because of the nature of his crimes and how truly despicable they are to say out loud, in the interrogation room, David himself goes, "I'm exhausted. I can't speak about this anymore." Sorry, you yourself are the only person responsible for your crimes, for doing what you did, yet you can't speak about them because they're that horrible. If that's not a sign of something being severely wired wrong in your head, I don't know what is. I've done a video on this guy before, David Fuller, over a year ago, but I stumbled upon my notes on the case when I did it back then, and I read them over, and I was like... Also, real quick, the first episode of the podcast is out today, which I'm really excited about. I'm so excited to hear what you guys have to say. The podcast is linked in my bio, and as a reminder, you can listen to it everywhere you get your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, blah, 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 blah. And the video version is available on YouTube. That should be also linked in my bio if you want to watch that. But anyway, let's just get into it, shall we? In 1987, in a town called Tunbridge Wells in Kent, England, a pretty small town. I think it's a small town, correct me if I'm wrong. A 25-year-old girl named Wendy was moving on fresh out of a breakup. She was finding herself again, becoming independent after ending a long-term relationship. And she moved into an apartment all on her own. She fell in love again. She was seeing this new guy. She was really excited about the potential this relationship had. For work, she was a manager of a film store, a job that she really enjoyed, in which she often worked night shifts. On June 22nd, the guy that she was seeing walked her home from work, and the next morning she never showed up for work. Nobody could get a hold of her. The man who was practically her boyfriend walked over to her apartment to see what was going on. He was stressed, he was worried, and when he got there, he noticed that the window was open. He climbed in, walked into the most horrific scene. Wendy was there. Her body was lying on her bed, but she was clearly no longer alive. Her body was left in horrible condition. She had hand marks on her neck that were starting to bruise, indicating that was likely the cause of her death. But besides that, she had clear signs of blunt force trauma to the head caused by some sort of weapon. The boyfriend called the police immediately. The police showed up as fast as they could, and they started investigating immediately. But the weird thing was, there was really no signs of anything. There were no signs of robbery, no forced entry, no signs of a struggle, just basically an open window and a deceased 25-year-old girl on her bed. No neighbors had seen or heard anything. The only clue they had was one whole fingerprint and a partial shoe print, but they really couldn't do anything with it. Later on, they were able to recover unidentified male DNA from the crime scene, but they tested it against their database and found no match. Remember, this was in the 80s. Wendy's autopsy showed that her attacker had SA her severely, but in a sickening detail, the autopsy showed that the SA did not happen until after her death. But unfortunately so, because authorities couldn't really do much with the fingerprint, the partial shoe print, the DNA, and they had 0 witnesses and 0 leads pretty much, the case eventually went cold. Now we're at 5 months after Wendy's death. In the same town of Tunbridge Wells lived Caroline Pierce, who was a 20-year-old girl who had a job working as a waitress. Police received a call from a group of concerned waitresses that were calling because they were worried about their coworker who had not showed up for work. They weren't really calling to report her missing. They were more so essentially calling for a wellness check. Police are trying to gain access, and as they are, the neighbors come out and say that they heard what sounded like a female screaming late last night. Once authorities are able to gain access, they go inside and they realize that Caroline is not home, but they start connecting the dots and realize this feels strangely similar to Wendy's case 5 months ago. But again, because this was in the 80s, they did not have yet a DNA database that they could use to help them out. All they could really do is turn to the public and beg for help. However, in Caroline's apartment, they were also able to recover unidentified male DNA that was found at her place, and because of the strange similarities, they tested that DNA from the DNA found at Wendy's place, and it was a match. So that was confirmation for them that this was the same man, the same attacker, and they were on the right track. The following month, in December of 1987, 40 miles away from Caroline's apartment, her body was found. It was found in a field with almost the exact same injuries that Wendy had, brutally damaged with blunt force trauma, bruises, open wounds, and the autopsy also showed that she had been severely SA'd after she was already deceased. As you can imagine, this was all over the news, and usually when authorities put this kind of information out to the public on purpose, they're using one of 2 tactics. In this case, their tactic, or the way that they were thinking about it, was let's put this out there so the person who committed the crimes know that we are aware, know that we're after him, and let's hope and pray that we scare him enough to not commit a crime again. again, but unfortunately that did not happen. The deaths of Wendy and Caroline were later referred to as the bedsit murders, and for 30 years there were no answers. Fast forward to the beginning of 2020. In 2020, there's a whole new generation of policemen. They're reading through cold case files and they realize that now they have a new and improved database. Database has previous criminals that committed a crime which caused authorities to take their DNA in the first place. So now having this resource, this database, police get the unidentified male DNA from all those years ago and they test it again hoping for a match, but still they don't get a match. So they think of what to do next. What can we do next to find this person? If we can't find him, maybe we can track down his family tree and trace him down that way. So they tested and examined different DNA samples for months until eventually they narrowed it down to 100 people and brought all of them in for questioning. One person stood out for them. That one person had a very similar DNA as the one recovered from the crime scene. So when they were interviewing that guy, they asked him about any relatives that he may have had, and this guy says that he is a brother in his 60s that lives in Tunbridge Wells. So the location of the crime matches up and the age does too, because back then when the crimes took place, authorities believed that their guy must have been in his 20s and this guy's brother was now in his 60s, so it made sense. His brother was a 65-year-old man named David Fuller. David Fuller had never been convicted of any crimes, hence why his DNA was not in the database. However, he did have somewhat of a criminal past. When he was a teenager, he broke into a few homes, but he never served any prison time. He set a few things on fire, but he was never convicted. He was basically just given a slap on the hand and said, don't do it again. But they also learned that this David guy had a history of being a peeping Tom in his teenage years and maybe even in his early 20s. David would quite literally hide in the shadows and watch women in their homes. Legit, that is what he did for fun. That is what he enjoyed doing. He enjoyed hiding in the bushes in the dark and just peeping into people's windows. And then he took it a step further, started breaking into homes only to hide and watch women from their bedrooms, from inside their house. How scary is that? He had a lot of issues for sure, the exact kind of guy that you should be terrified of. But now, as a 65-year-old man, he was a general maintenance worker. He had a wife, he had 3 children, one who was a teenager and was still living with him. He had been working as a maintenance worker for a while. His longest and steadiest job was working at a hospital where he had been a worker since 2008. Now in 2020, he had built a pretty solid reputation for himself. He was loved by all the staff, well respected, friendly, a nice, normal family guy. And because he was a maintenance worker, he had an access key card to every single area of the hospital. Keep that in mind. So police have enough reason to believe that this guy seems suspicious. They had reason to suspect David Fuller. So December 3rd of 2020, police go to his house and arrest him in connection to the murders back in the 80s. And what do you know? They take his DNA, test it against the DNA found at the crime scenes, and it's an exact match. So now he is officially charged with the deaths of Caroline and Wendy. When talking to the police, David is acting clueless, because of course he is. He's saying that he doesn't know who the girls are, he doesn't know the town, he doesn't know anything. But a thing that he for sure did not know was that while he was being interrogated, a different group of police officers were back at his house searching it, basically ripping it apart. And boy, oh boy, the things that they found even more evidence connecting him to both Wendy and Caroline, including old pictures of his shoes that matched the shoe print found at Wendy's apartment. They found receipts showing that he often went to the film shop where Wendy worked at to get prints printed, and they found receipts from the restaurant that Caroline worked at. And as if that wasn't bad enough, they also found pictures of himself, and in the background was the exact same field where Caroline's body was found. They found his diary, journals that he wrote in every single day. That's something about David. He liked to write every single day about everything that he did. They found photos, photo albums, SD card, hard drives, basically any electronic device that you could store pictures or videos in, David had. But the thing about these devices was that they were very well hidden. In his house, they found them hidden, taped underneath a desk. They found carved out spaces in walls. He would literally carve out little holes in the walls and keep them in there to store them and hide them. They also found multiple phones that were at max storage with videos and pictures. I mean, you name it, he had it all. Honestly, any device that you can think of. And in that footage and in those pictures, they found that David had been using his master key card at the hospital to access the morgue after hours. At the hospital that he worked for, almost every single day, David had this routine of sneaking into the morgue after hours. He would take his toolbox inside with him just in case anyone walked in and asked him what he was doing in there, and he would take advantage of the deceased bodies. In the most unspeakable ways, in the most unimaginable ways possible, he would SA them, he would touch them, do things to them, do things with them to pleasure himself. and he recorded all of it. From the recordings, it was found that he did this to at least 100 bodies aged from 9 to 100. And that amount of 100 victims is only the amount that they were able to identify from the footage. But it was proven that his key card was used to go into the morgue after hours thousands of times, so we will never really know. In his diary and journals that he kept, he would write in detail everything that he did. He would write his victims' names, ages, he would write in details the actions and movements that he did to them. And there were times where the same name was written over and over again and then it just disappeared, meaning that the body was likely returned to the family for them to give their loved one a proper funeral and lay them to rest. And I know no one wants to imagine this, but to know that your loved one's body was in the hospital being examined for an autopsy or whatever the case is, and then learning years later how mistreated and SA they were in the morgue by a staff member from the hospital is truly, truly vile. He was charged with the 2 murders plus 51 in trial. David originally pled not guilty, but 4 days in, he changed his plea and pled guilty for everything. He confessed to everything, and as if he needed to, they literally had him on video from footage that he recorded himself. For all of the charges combined, he was sentenced to 2 life sentences plus, I'm pretty sure 12 extra years, meaning that he will spend the rest of his life in prison where he belongs. What he did was traumatizing, and as I'm sure you can imagine, it left so many families and so many people with so much more trauma. Family members said that after finding out what David did to their family members, it felt like they lost that person all over again. It's horrific and it makes me want to throw up. But that is all I have for today's video. Thank you guys for spending time with me today and for listening to this case. I hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.